Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start the program in about 5 minutes, so I really am enjoying all the talking, but get serious about getting your food. And you don't have to stop talking yet. 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes. Yeah. Yvonne, hurry up. We're waiting on you. Finish getting your food. Nothing to see here. All right. If I can have everybody's attention, we will go ahead and get started with the program. I do not want to discourage you from eating. The students that are here know that my rule is nobody leaves till the food is gone. So yeah, make sure you get up and get seconds and thirds and fourths and tres leches cake. It's hard to say that at this point in the day, I'm sorry. So we had a very successful morning with K-12 students, and when our engineering place folks come in from cleaning up, I'm going to recognize them. So be prepared. We have to give them a standing ovation because they did great. We had kids starting at kindergarten all the way up through grade 12 here. And of course, we have some high school students here with us this afternoon as well. There she is right there. Give her a hand. That's Dr. Leah Bug with the engineering place. So we were just telling how successful the morning was, Leah. So that's good. So before we go any further, though, we are privileged to have the Dean of Engineering with us today, Dr. Louis Martin Vega, and he's going to maybe bring you some greetings.
Thank you very much, Laura, and excuse my hoarseness, but it's carried over from last Saturday night's football game for a whole week. I have to tell you that. First of all, let me just welcome everybody, Laura, all of you. This is really a phenomenal moment and a tremendous milestone, You know, 25 years of the Women in Engineering program. When I've been here a long time. When I arrived, it was in its 9th year. And it was growing and developing, but I never forget when I arrived, and I'm going to be very honest with you about this. Of the 200 and some faculty members that we had in the college at that time, I don't believe we had more than 10 women faculty. And when I was interviewed, I was asked about that. And my answer was very simple. I said, that's shameful. It's shameful. I was a dean of a college that was half the size of this one. And I can tell you that we had a lot more women and a lot more underrepresented minorities on our faculty and in our student body. But to make a long story short, there's a lot of things that have helped us move the needle significantly in that, but few have had the impact of this program. I think this program has really created the culture and the environment that tells all the young women that might aspire to study engineering that this is indeed a place for you. This is not the exception, this is a rule. And now we have a first-year class that is 1/3 or more female. Laura gave a wonderful presentation to the legislature a few weeks ago that really shared the progress of the program. We now have somewhere upwards of 70 or 80 women faculty members and a faculty of 300 and some. And I think some of the slides are showing that 3 of our department heads are in fact women faculty, right? But when somebody asked me in the legislature, so what's the goal? I said, you gotta be kidding me. At least 50-50, right? At least. No, there was a time, let's be honest, when medical schools and law schools and engineering had very little women representation. Go to medical schools today, go to law schools today, and at some point in the future, I want people to come to this engineering school and say, that's where everybody needs to be. So anyway, Laura, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Okay. I have a special presentation to make as well. There's somebody here who I would like all of you to meet, and I'm just delighted that she has joined us this morning. When I mentioned that when I came here, there were only about 10 tenure-track faculty members who were women, at one time, there was only one. There was one person who was the first female tenured track faculty member to be hired in the College of Engineering at NC State. And she is with us here today, and I'm talking about or speaking of Dr. Sarah Rajala. Sarah? When you talk about first, all the first have to do with Sarah. First female tenure track faculty member, first faculty member to have a baby, right? Okay, Sarah? She told me that, right? So, okay. In engineering, okay. And go on and on from there. But she also told me that when she came to NC State, she was in the building that was called Daniels at one time, and for her to go to a restroom, she had to go down 2 floors, okay? And this was the dynamic that existed at one time. Well, Sarah's career has been just phenomenal. When I arrived, she left me, right? I tease her. But Sarah had already accepted a position to be the head of electrical engineering at Mississippi State. From there, she went on to be the dean of engineering at Mississippi State. From there, she went on to be the dean of engineering at Iowa State, where she retired just a couple of years ago, and just this last year was inducted into the National Academy of Engineering, right? Yay. The other tidbit, and which is why I'm going to ask Sarah to come up now and share a few words, is that guess who hired Laura Bottomley here? Sarah. And boy, was that ever a good choice, right? So, Sarah, thank you so much for being here, and I'd like you to come up and maybe share a few words, and I know there's something special that you may want to do here as well. Thank you again, everybody. Dr. Sarah Rajala.
Thank you, Louis, for the kind words, and Louis deserves a special recognition as well because he also was recently elected into the National Academy of Engineering, and it's we will be going at the same time to Washington, D.C. to be officially inducted. It'll be the first time in 3 years they've done in-person induction, so we'll have fun together in a few weeks in Washington, D.C. I do want to say a few words about Laura Bottomley. Well, it's in the plan now. Laura and her husband, Greg, were graduate students in the electrical and computer engineering department a few years ago. And were graduate students that I either had in class, served on their defense committees, or were part of the center that I was a part of, and then went on to do other things after they got their PhDs. Laura went over to Duke University and was on the faculty there for a while, and she and I were talking one day, and she was exploring and thinking about what she wanted to do next. And I was very committed to focusing attention in the College of Engineering on women and underrepresented minorities. And we already had a minority engineering program, but we did not, in spite of many years of special little projects, we didn't have a women in engineering program. So Laura and I were talking about, I said, I'd really like to start this. I don't have a whole lot of resources. I was Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. But I think I could put together a half-time position, and then we'd have to work from there. And Laura said, well, I might be interested, and she certainly had the passion and expertise in this area. So she gave up her position at Duke, came over to NC State, and has done unbelievable things since that time. So from a half-time position, and I told her, we can go out and you can write proposals, we can write proposals together, we can go to foundations and look for resources, and as soon as we have the money, I will move your position to full-time. So I'm not quite sure, I don't recall myself how long that took us, but we got there pretty quickly, and Laura established efforts in women in engineering to mentor new young women coming into our engineering program, summer bridge programs, and very soon we had conversations about what else can we do, and Laura's always got brilliant ideas. And she said, well, I think we really need to be focusing earlier than college, and we need to be thinking about K-12 education. And I said, well, if we can figure out how to fund it, I was always worrying about the resources as an administrator, but figuring out a way in which we could make improvements for everybody so that our environment was welcoming to women, to underrepresented minorities, to whomever was out there that wanted to study engineering. And soon enough, the K-12 engineering program was started, later Engineering Place. The impact she has had both on our women in engineering students in the College of Engineering, but over 1 million, think about it, over 1 million K-12 students over the past 25 years is phenomenal. And changing that percentage in the population from 10 or 12% that it was when we were starting this effort to more than 1/3 of the freshman students being women now is phenomenal. This is not an easy challenge. We have worked hard in different venues for years trying to resolve these kinds of issues. In, oh Laura, I'm gonna forget the year, I forgot to write it down. I think 2000 or 2001, the Women in Engineering program and Minority Engineering program at NC State received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring from Bill Clinton. And Laura, myself, Tony Mitchell, who was leading the Minority Engineering program at that point, had the honor to go to Washington, D.C. and receive this award. But even more impressive, Laura received that award again for individual efforts in mentoring a number of years later. She went on to start the American Society for Engineering Education K-12 program. There wasn't an effort at one point in ASEE, now called the PK-12 program. And she led that initiative with a group of people, got it underway, and it's a very successful piece of the American Society for Engineering Education. And she was also instrumental in helping myself, Joanne Cohen, Susan Grant, in establishing the Women in Science and Engineering Living and Learning community. If it weren't for Laura to help really launch that effort, it would not have happened. And in the spring, it will celebrate its 20th year. So I am so thrilled to be here today. I am delighted that Laura took on the challenge and thought of all of the wonderful things that would make a difference here at NC State in the lives of our students at the undergraduate as well as graduate level, reaching out to the state broadly in terms of K-12 education. And I want to share just one little story with you. And Laura probably remembers this, maybe not, but I was still here on the faculty and in the administration, and she came in one day with a story about going out to one of the schools. And on that particular day, and it was an elementary school, and they were doing, Laura loves to blow up things and do all kinds of active learning with students. And she always takes undergraduate and graduate students with her. And you know, it depends on the student's schedule who comes along. Well, that day, Laura was out there, and the students that went with her happened to be all female. They didn't point this out. They didn't do anything different than they would normally do. But at the question and answer, and I think it was maybe second grade, first grade, yeah, it was pretty early elementary, as I recall, one little boy raises his hand and says, "Ms. Bottomley, can boys be engineers too?" And I thought, oh, I'll never forget that. You know, it is And they didn't even have to point it out. And of course she said, oh, of course boys can be engineers too. But, you know, even at a second grade or first grade level, that little boy noticed that the students and the faculty that were there that day happened to be all female. So for all of your contributions, I have a special recognition to share with you, and this is a recognition that was designed and created here at NC State, and it says, so Laura, come on up. Oops, the stand is falling off. Oh, that's cute, a wolf stand. So it says, Dr. Laura J. Bottomley, thank you for 25 years of cultivating our Women in Engineering program. So, I lost the wolf again. It's not glass.
Thank you, right? I would break it anyway. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all so much. This is a very big surprise, and now we're way behind on schedule. No, I'm just teasing. Thank you. This is so sweet. I really appreciate the kind words. You got to know, though, that nobody does anything like this alone. I couldn't have done any of these things without Sarah, without Louie, without Kathy Titus Becker with WISE, wherever she went to. There she is, right? Lisa Marshall sitting next to her, nuclear engineering and female advocate a la extraordinaire, right? Leah Bug in the engineering place. None of this could have happened without them. I couldn't have done it without the foundation, because you know we're working on a shoestring budget, right? Everything we do is paid for by donations. And so the foundation and donors are sitting right here, right? It wouldn't happen without any of them. And of course, without my fabulous colleague, Angelitha Daniel, who had the audacity to leave me. She is the very first assistant dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the College of Engineering now. So she's doing great things. And I don't want to leave any of my colleagues out, but the very tip-top person, the person without whom nothing happens, is Miss Kim Pender. So if you come to one of our events and you enjoy it, tell me. If you didn't, tell her. No, that's not at all. So thank you all so very much. We do have a lot of wonderful guests with us today. So we have, and would you mind standing when I recognize you really quick, Liz? We have a whole cadre of undergraduate engineering students. They're our most special guests. Would you all stand? Yvonne, would you please also stand? You're an honorary engineering student. All right, thank you. We have a cadre of engineering graduate students here today. Would you all stand, please? And you know, you guys are why we're here, right? So you are our most important guests for today. We have a whole group of engineering faculty, staff, department heads. Would you all stand, please? We have a whole bunch of representatives of the Engineering Foundation Board. Would you all stand, please? We even have the chair of the NC State Foundation Board, Debbie Bell Young. I keep forgetting the we have some high school students here who are prospective NC State students. Would you all please stand? And we have my mom and dad and my sister and my brother-in-law and my niece here too. So see, with this group together, I'm not quite sure that there's anything we couldn't accomplish. So, did I forget anybody? I don't know. Well, I have a short PowerPoint presentation. It's only 5,000 or 6,000 slides. I think you probably paid attention to these rotating slides that were going while you were here. So the committee that put this whole experience today together, and we started at 8:30 this morning with K-12 students, and that they are also here. That includes Kim, it includes Leah. Can I have my committee members wave real quick, please? Where's Kayleen and Kim and, yeah. So we selected some role models from across the various departments, across the college. Some of them are alums, some of them are serving currently, and we've been highlighting them, and we will continue to highlight them around the college, because I think 25 years is enough to take a few weeks to celebrate. So these will be around. If you are here and I haven't given you your individual poster, make sure you see me before you go, because I have copies of the poster for those that are recognized like this. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Bhavna, in just a minute. That's fair warning. I wanted to show you all something. This is a Mac. I don't know if I can do this. There it goes. So we were recently recognized by ZDNet.com as among the best colleges for women and minorities in STEM. If you notice, we're listed as number 6 there, as best colleges for women and minorities, and I want you to understand that this list also includes women's colleges and HBCUs, and we're number 6. That ain't nothing. I have people ask me a lot what we do differently here at NC State, and the fact of the matter is, we, and I mean all of us, all of y'all, right? We work together. We don't do pipelines at NC State, okay? We are not plumbers. Although I like plumbers, especially certain times where I like them very much, but we plant gardens. Because we realize that if you think of, finding somebody in high school and bringing them in, and then they go through the various years of their experience, and then they graduate and whatnot, and you're thinking of it as a pipeline, that's extremely restrictive. There's one way in, there's one way out. Sometimes it leaks, but if you leak out, you can't come back, right? You're lost. Pipelines also tend to shape the things in them to themselves. And that is not what we want. And that is not what we do here at NC State. We think of NC State more as a garden. We want all kinds of seeds to be planted in our garden, because we know that that's what diversity makes an ecosystem stronger. Diversity also makes engineering stronger. We know that problems are not solved by the same types of minds that created them. And we know we have a lot of problems. So we need a lot of new and different types of minds. And so that's what we're about at NC State. One way to get different types of minds is to get women and men at the table. But that's only one way. And so if you look around, we also let me see, start that sentence over again, please. We place a high emphasis on having diverse women, because we need diverse minds of all types. And so that's what we have here. That's why we are so strong, right? Because when we stand together, one of us has got an idea. One of us can figure out how to solve the problems. And so we don't do it alone. We do it together. And that's NC State. So thanks go out to every single person here in this room. That was it. So I have the privilege now of introducing our keynote speaker. So Bhavna Bartov came to us, I don't know how many months ago now it was when we first started talking about doing this. And she has been a promoter of women, a promoter of women's leadership for many, many years. So at the time that she came, she was vice president at Microsoft. Well, they didn't cut it for her, so she's now at Bank of America. She is going to bring to us a message. And then I think going to take a few questions. All right, thank you. Please come and join us. Bhavna Bartov.
All right, good afternoon. Everyone can hear me okay? All right, and you can see me, because that's why I like the stage. Well, one, I want to just say good afternoon to everyone and just do a quick check-in. How is everyone doing after such amazing news? Are we doing good? All right, I just want to be clear. Laura has fed you all, so you can do a lot better than that. So how is everyone doing? All right. As Laura mentioned, I'm Bhavna Bartov. I'm super excited to be here. And it's amazing to see this event come together, because as Laura shared, I think it was about 6 to 7 months ago, and we were talking about just different ways in which people could, actually Wanda's right here. I remember having the conversation with Wanda, who helped make it all a reality and get us connected. When they were talking about, all right, how do you want to support the school? It's usually done through scholarships. And all I could think of is, if I did scholarships, it's only going to help a few people. And so I said, well, what can we do to take the funding and make it bigger? And I think, as they all called out, everything requires funding if you choose to do it. But the biggest piece was, how do you make every dollar count? And so our conversation was really initially around, the university does an amazing job around providing STEM-based education for women, for minorities, as well as for everybody else as well. But for that specific community where we need to be driving change. But what we wanted to do is really look at what other skills and experiences do we really want to, as Laura said, you guys are not creating just a pipeline, you're really developing talent that can do amazing things. And so what else are we missing? And so one of the biggest things that came to mind for me was around that soft skills, around leadership, around advocacy. How do we enable women to feel stronger and more empowered? And so it was great. Laura then said, hey, we have 25 years of women in engineering. It's coming up. I think it's a great time for us to talk about what we want to be able to do for the school and continue to build this great momentum. And I do want to, before I even say anything and talk about myself, I do think we need to give Laura a great round of applause. I heard everything and I was like, The only thing I could think of is, I don't know what I have to say. I think I should just step down, because Laura's done so much for this school, and I love seeing how many people are here because of her. Just the fact that we have students that had an amazing experience, all of you in high school, I'm jealous, just because I was never, I don't think I was this, pumped up and excited at this age to be here, and I love the opportunities you have, and I also have realized I'm old, so. That was, but it's exciting to see that you guys are here and you have parents that support you to make this happen. But I do think, Laura, everything you've done for the school, what you're doing for future generations of kids, and as you just shared, one of the biggest things the school should be proud of is your diversity statistics. For the school overall, and then for the College of Engineering, I remember when we did the freshman class last year, over half the students were women last year when you guys brought them in, and overall it's a third. That's phenomenal. I don't think any other school can truly claim that for the impact that you all have. So you should all be proud to be here and be part of the school. As Laura mentioned, so for me, my career at NC State started, I say career because you guys did a lot for me when I started here. 24 years ago, I guess. I'm dating myself now. But I came to NC State, I came from India. So I grew up in India with my grandparents. I did my undergraduation there. And you have to remember, back then we didn't have access to the internet like you all had. Does anyone remember the internet where you connect and you wait for that sound? That's right. It wasn't as instantaneous. Now my kids can't even last a second when it, reloads or something for them. But so from then, even back then, from India, as I was looking at universities to come to the US, one of the things that stood out with NC State even back then was I think they were number 5 for industrial engineering at the time. But they were also known as a university that did a great job around funding and supporting and sponsoring international students. Because it's a big thing as you come as an international student from another country, and the cost of education is very different as you kind of come here. But they did, and I was actually really pleased. I was telling someone this story today. So ABB, that's on Centennial campus, ended up giving me an internship through my course of the 2 years as I did my master's, and actually paid for both my education and to support me to be able to stay. And it is phenomenal to see that I do not recognize anything in Centennial campus anymore, but I saw the ABB sign as I drove in. And I did, even though I was talking to my husband, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to stop and take a picture. He's like, are you still driving? I was like, oh, I should stop and pay attention. So luckily there was no one around, and it did not get reported. But the thing that stands out for me is just, if it hadn't been for this university, for giving me that opportunity and building that confidence in a young woman, I was young then, but to be able to feel like I had the ability to do more, and that there was a whole world ahead of me and I would be able to be successful because you guys set that right foundation for me. And I'll always be grateful. So I do, the ABB thing was just amazing, just to be able to have that as I came in to talk to you all today. So over my career, I got hired by Microsoft, which was interesting, being a manufacturing student. And I remember when Microsoft actually called me, or the person that contacted me, I thought somebody was messing with me. I seriously think, and many of you may not know about the show Punk'd, but it existed back then. I seriously thought some of my roommates were messing with me because I was a manufacturing student, and Microsoft was not a place that I would have thought would be one interested in me. And what was interesting was they found me because my resume was on the NC State database. So it wasn't that I applied to the school, it wasn't, to the university, sorry, and it wasn't, sorry, everyone's calling me now, to the university. And so when I started my conversation with Microsoft, and the reason I want to share this story is really important for everyone to recognize, right, is they looked at it as, and they asked me some really strange questions back then, but they asked me about a salt and pepper shaker, and I don't know what they were asking, but they asked me to just talk about what's different, what I think, and they were trying to figure out, like, what is my style of thinking, how do I communicate, what is my foundation, and I even remember making it through those first calls, and then I go to Microsoft to do my interview, and the first person that comes in starts asking me some questions on coding. And I remember sitting there saying, I think then maybe you guys really have finally made a mistake, because I don't know anything you're talking about, and I don't know what I'm actually doing here. And so the person was like, oh, that's okay, we just may have messed up who we're talking to, but then they started having a conversation to get to know me as a person. They asked me a bunch of random riddles, which I don't actually remember anymore, but what was fascinating was by the end of that day, before I actually left, someone came running up and said, hey, we're gonna hire you. And I love that piece, because they said no, and in my mind I even said, but I actually didn't answer anything computer related. And they said, well, we don't care. We care about your potential and your passion. And that's what every single one of you in this room has, is that potential and passion. As Dean Louis was already sharing about your story, it was that whole thing around you've got to believe that you can, right? It all starts with imagining that you can. And when you know you can and you think about it, and Laura's helped all those dreams come true that everyone's had, I think that's our first step. And I know what you're experiencing, right? It's a tough thing to think about that you belong somewhere, right? And that sense of feeling of you know you have the capability and you have the power to do it. And I will say, so over that, through my whole career at Microsoft, I've taken that to its whole extent in the context of half the jobs I've done, I've had no freaking clue what I'm doing. But at the end of the day, we figure it out, because that's what we as women do. That's what we have been trained to do our whole lives, right? Everything that happens to us, or we make happen for us, whichever way we want to look at it, we deal with change at a crazy level. We learn to adjust, to acclimate, to compromise. I hate using that word, but we do it a lot. But the reality is that's what makes us excellent, excellent people in today's workforce. Take the pandemic. One of the biggest things that the pandemic shone a light on was that, does everyone remember when the pandemic hit and all of us were at home, not knowing what the heck we were doing with all of our family that all of a sudden we had to bond with? But the biggest thing was when everything shut down, companies shut down, not knowing how to manage the change, universities had to shut down, and all of us were at home. And there was a point in time in that beginning of the pandemic when the whole world came to a halt. Think about it. The whole world came to a halt. But then what happened? Every single woman stepped up. You stepped up and you tried to figure out whether we knew what was happening or not in the world around us, or whether some of us even believed this pandemic was a really pandemic. We thought this was going to last, even whether we thought it was going to be a month or 2 months. Now, granted, it took years. But we made the world start moving. It was every woman that selflessly made a decision on, my family needs me, I've got to take care of your parents, or if it was, the teachers, if you look at the number of teachers that exist in the school systems, every single one of them had to step up and be creative. But it really was women that made that change. So if we hadn't recognized prior to this is that foundational, that pivotal moment in our history that proved how critical we were. And I think Dean Louis was talking about, as you guys were at the legislative, like what should that balance be? Like what's the target that we're working towards? And what's fascinating is, today, I don't know how many of you know this, but for every dollar a man makes, in the US, a woman makes 83 cents. So there's a 17-cent gap. Now globally, the number is much higher. If you're a woman of color, it's significantly different as well. But what's interesting based on studies, companies that actually pay men and women the same actually outperform their competitive peers by 50% in performance. 50%. So it isn't actually a dollar for dollar match. It's a significant difference when women are paid equally. Now, the second piece of information on why this effort and why this college and everything you guys are doing is so important is that statistically, we have about 48% of the workforce, the entry level of workforce that goes into the world of business are women. But today, there's only 4.6 female CEOs in the global Fortune 500. So there's 23 women. So kind of to your numbers, right? Like it's not that much. Out of 500 companies, we have 23 that are run by women. And then when we look at the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic, 64 million jobs around the globe were lost by women. Because that's what I said, women made big sacrifices to help the world continue to turn. But what's interesting is, when we look at all of those numbers and the impact we had, and the gender gap grew obviously with 64 million women having to step out of the workforce, the gender gap grew by 35 points, which is crazy. But if you actually drive gender equity across the board, globally, women actually will attribute to adding $28 trillion to the global GDP. $28 trillion, so it's no joke. So the importance of every single one of you building your careers, the impact that all of this faculty has in regards to how we can truly impact and change the world at the pace at which the world is going right now. We need to move faster, we need to be innovative, we need to be thinking differently. And who better to do it than women? We've proved it time and time again. And so what we're all doing here is extremely important. Now, the piece that I want to talk about that I've spent a lot of my career on, and I'll share a little bit of that, but I wanted to make sure you all understood of how important this effort is and that we're making it a reality and that every single person in this room has shown up today, is that what you're going to be doing in the future of this world is extremely important. And this university plays a huge difference in getting you ready to make that happen. In my career, I've had the opportunity, as I said, to do a lot of things. I mean, I spent 22 years at Microsoft, and I know Laura said I literally changed my job 2 days ago to Bank of America. So I still want to thank Microsoft for supporting this, because they did come through. But in my 22 years, what's interesting is I've actually done 16 different jobs. Not just because I was super confused all the time and kept changing my job, but a lot of companies like to reorg and restructure because your client, your market continues to change. And so over the years in those careers, I've done the gamut of sales, marketing, consulting, client success. I've done startup organizations for Microsoft. I've worked, I've run technical sales strategies. And so as I keep telling you the different jobs I've done, obviously you all have recognized she doesn't have that background, because when you go from one to the other. But the biggest thing is, the world is changing so fast that when you come in, you may have more skills than half of us that have been in the workforce for a long time. And so the reality is everyone comes in at an equal level of value, which I think we underestimate that. Because as a woman, we always think when we're sitting at a table, oh my God, that person is obviously smarter or better or has more to add than I do. The reality is with your lived experience, regardless of how many years, you have something to contribute, and there's value to what you bring because you have a unique perspective. And that's the biggest thing that I learned over my career, is that I have the equal right to have a seat at the table, regardless of what that table is. And I've also been, the quote that Laura has, this is one of my favorite quotes. I was raised, by my grandfather, who came from nothing, and his biggest piece of advice to me as I grew up with him was, at the end of the day, it's all about how you make people feel. And the reason he said that was more of, he said, you should never forget where you come from. More importantly, because you don't know what can happen to you at any point in time. Things can get taken from you, so don't get used to it. And I think for me, the reason this quote stands out so much is, this is what shows up for me at work every day. Right? It's not about the titles I've held. It's not about the roles that I may have had. It's really about how I made people feel through that process. Did I inspire them to feel like they could do more? Did I, when they talked to me, did they feel like they could actually connect with me at a personal level? And that's what work is about. It doesn't matter what your job is. It boils down to relationships. How successful you are in your career is based on the relationships, and obviously you do need to do your job. I'm not saying that there's no work to be done. But the bottom line is, it's about respect. It's about listening with a sense of curiosity and learning and understanding. And it really is about making sure people feel like they are seen and heard. And that was kind of your story when you talked about what you're all doing, is it's about being recognized and seen for who you really truly are. Not just because you're a woman or you're younger or older. It doesn't matter. It really is about what you bring to the table, and there's a lot you can do. But through my whole career, I would say that as I was going, making changes in my career, one of the biggest things as women, and I've spent several conversations with women in different industries, in different stages of their career. One of the biggest things as women we struggle with is self-advocacy. And we struggle with it, and that's been my biggest thing right now is if we really need to empower women, it's going to start at that foundation of self-advocacy. Because what happens to us as women, if you think about it, just look at, my biggest realization was during the pandemic, and I used to be this person, I'm saying I used to, I still am, but this person that prided myself in being able to do everything, right? Being a great mom, or trying to be a great mom, because I don't think my kids are going to agree to that statement if I don't correct it. Trying to be a great mom, you're working at a company, managing a big team, being there as a daughter, being there as a sister, as a friend, and then there's people that need you. And as women, we tend to prioritize everybody else. We focus on, what they all need. We try to make sure that culturally, I was raised where as the woman, it's your responsibility to be able to cook, to clean, to do all of that. So we have our day jobs, and then we have all this other stuff that nobody wants to pay us for. But I don't know if everybody knows, if you actually, monetized the unpaid labor of women, it will be the largest industry in the world, which obviously it should be at this point, given how much work we all do. But the reality is what I learned was when I was younger, I was raised to self-advocate, I had a level of confidence and drive. But somewhere along the line, as women, one of the things we don't realize happens to us is we start deprioritizing ourselves. Now, we create a narrative in our head that we are, when we have that conversation at work around, wanting to be mentored or, taking a new job, and we kind of make it feel like we've prioritized ourselves. But the reality is we don't. And it took me recognizing that I was doing things for everyone else versus really looking and reflecting and taking a step back and realizing what is it that I wanted for myself. And what's interesting is anyone that looked at me thought I had an amazing career at Microsoft, but what I realized was it wasn't going fast enough for me. Now, this was several years ago, so I didn't leave Microsoft because of this conversation, but the biggest thing that I learned, and that was the conversation I had within the company about 4 or 5 years ago, was that you're not paying me right. I'm not right-sized to the market. And I know that's not an easy conversation to have. Compensation is one of the toughest conversations women have as they go through it. Asking to be promoted. And even if you've done it, you've gone and had the conversation, there's that voice in your head that's saying, oh my God, are they going to say yes? Are they going to be unhappy with me? Is someone not going to like me? That someone not going to like me, I've learned right now, is I don't give a crap if they like me or not. I'm just going to do what's there, and if they accept me for who I am, and this is what happens when you get older, you stop caring about what people think and you just do what is right for you at some point. But that's a tough thing to do. And so as I talk to all the younger students in here, remember that. Self-advocacy is not about being selfish. It's about driving clarity and making sure that both sides of the table understand what's important to you. And what's important to you should matter. No one else gets to tell you that it does not. And so remember that as you're thinking about your careers, don't settle. Just because something works for somebody else doesn't mean it needs to work for you. And so I've learned over time that you create your own path, and it's up to you to do that, to really take the time to think about what works for you. I will say, if someone asks me about my career, it's not the same as anyone else at Microsoft. I've done all the things that people say, is not how it works. And I like that, because I've just done all of the anomalies. And so I kind of always go with the approach of, well, if no one's done it, then anything I do could be better than that. So it's always a great way to do. So I've taken the jobs nobody's wanted. I've gone into really risky, businesses, and I was like, if the business is failing, if I did anything, it's going to work. And no one else looks at it that way. And if it fails, it was failing anyway. So that's my logic. But I think the context to that is you've got to try and do what works for you. And I think what works for me is I like being in spaces that are undefined. I like being in spaces that no one else has done it. And I think some of that is it just makes things easier on me because no one can compare me to somebody else, which is great. And even someone asked me about, Bank of America, like why the change? Especially from being in 22 years in a software company and then going to the bank. And I will say at Microsoft, everyone lost the bet. Because when I announced I was leaving, I couldn't say where. And the number of people that made bets on which company I was going to, no one came up with the bank. I mean, obviously, that was not in the list. But the thing for me at this point in time when I was looking at the bank was really around someone that knew me. This is where I go back to. It's all about relationships and making that time. Someone that I knew in common just said, hey, let's have a conversation. There was no job at the bank. And so even in a company that doesn't know me, they created this job for me. So this is a new job that they put in place just based on things that I said are important to me that I want to be able to do. And if you can make all that work, that's great. And then the other big thing I'll say, at some point, culture matters. Where you go, it has to be, I will always say prioritize that. I think a lot of times we prioritize just the money or maybe a title and a job. And I will tell you, over having spent a career at Microsoft where I've gone through 3 CEOs and the differences in that, culture makes a big difference. Inclusion and belonging now have become vocabulary that every company is using, and recognize that it's important. It's not important just about from the context of we want to bring in diversity, we want to support it. It really is beneficial to each of those companies when they get it right, because it actually accelerates innovation. The companies that innovate faster are the companies that have diversity. And I already gave you guys the statistics of what women can do and the impact that we have. And so realize that those are things that you should be asking companies. When you interview and you start that job, you interview that company as much as they interview you, because they need to make sure that they want you there, and that you need to make sure that's a place you're going to choose. And I will say that made a big difference with the bank, because I have not spoken to so many people trying to convince me that they do a lot for women. And so the first thing I told Laura was, I was like, so they're going to be funding this thing too? Because that was part of my conversation with them, was like, this is what is important to me, and if you guys can, put your money where your mouth is, and that's great. And so that was the first thing I told Laura, I was like, now the bank's interested in making a difference too, because I think, but that's what's important. So you've got to really look at it. So while they've created the job, the biggest part for me was what they do philanthropically, because that's a huge part of who I am, what matters to me, and why I choose why I choose where I go. So with that, the biggest pieces that I will leave you with, because I feel like I am at time, so I don't want to keep everyone longer, because I know we have an amazing lineup this afternoon as well, is, self-advocacy is very powerful, and never forget that. And as women, you've got to remember the power of what makes you you and unique is critical. So there's 5 things I'm going to ask you to remember. I know it's always in 3s, but I'm going to go with 5. So the 5 thing is that it starts with what we talked about earlier, and which Laura is helping us bring to light, is it's imagine you can. You cannot be what you can't see. And so it starts with you. And I think having the representation that we have here, I think is a great sign. And I think, as I was talking to Dean Louie, having female faculty makes a huge difference in regards to attracting women in the organization. And the more women we have in the university, you attract more women into this university as well. So we can only continue to go up from here. The second, and this one is one of the toughest things for women, is honoring and sharing your story. It doesn't matter if you're in high school, if you're an undergrad, if you're a graduate student, if you're a faculty, or if you get as old as me, it doesn't matter. All of our stories make a big difference. And when you get comfortable in talking about your stories, and I will tell you, the most powerful stories are the toughest stories you've had. Like, some of my toughest experiences in life are actually the best stories I tell. And it's actually what makes us unique and gives us that power of what makes you you. And so start getting comfortable in talking about that, because that's going to help you with self-advocacy as you kind of go down that path. The third thing is you always have to remember you have a choice. People always think of, I'm stuck, I don't have anything, I don't have any other way I can do this. Someone said no to a promotion. Well, that's great. They can say no, but you can go somewhere else. But we never look at what those options are, and we don't take the time to pause. And what we're pausing for is really recognizing what our fear is. Because the reason we feel sometimes paralyzed in your careers, or when you're making choices, or when you're in a bad situation, is because we think we don't have a choice, and it's because of what we're worried about and that fear of the unknown. So just take a breather, and make sure you take the time to analyze and figure out what that is. The last one, the 4th one, before I get to the last one, is really about asking for what you want. There's a famous quote, and it's attributed to John Wayne, of all people, but I'm going to go with him for today. It's, courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. Courage literally cannot exist without fear. So whenever you feel anxious and afraid, just know everyone goes through that experience. Because if they haven't, they're lying to you, just so you know. So the reality is they all may show it differently. So when you feel scared, sometimes it's a good thing, because it's going to push you to really do more than you think you are capable of. And so when you go make that ask, be big and bold. And the thing that I tell everybody is, as women, do not over-explain yourself. Make your ask and just leave it. People can just sit there, don't know what to do with you. It's okay. Just enjoy that silence for a minute, and at some point they'll react, but just go with it. And the last thing that I will say is, we all need our people. This community of women is critical. Women and our allies too, all the men in the room, but I'll just start with the women. All of the women in the room, what's important for you to remember is you've got to be there to support each other. Without judgment, you know, sometimes, and I will say in my career, some of my toughest points in my career have been when I worked for other women that struggled with having another woman in the business. And we can't afford to do that. As we've talked about the statistics, there aren't enough of us. And so we really need to band together, and we really need to make a difference. And so all I'm asking is, those are the 5 things to remember about self-advocacy. It's not as hard as if we try to take a time to do it. I have more information on there online if you want to look it up. But my most important thing that I can ask all of you is, you know, we're in a pivotal moment in history, coming out of the pandemic with all the great accomplishments and progress that we've made so far. But we have a lot more progress to make. And we can't do this and wait for the Laura Bottomleys of the world and all of the other folks. I think it's a responsibility that every single woman in this room has. And we proved that during the pandemic, when we worked together, we actually made the world start turning again. So think about what would happen if you all simply took the time to just ask for what you wanted, and you made a difference in the world. So with that, I'm going to say thank you all for having me here, and I appreciate it.
Bhavana, thank you so much. We are honored to have you here, and thank you so much for sharing your message with us. I did fail to recognize somebody that I want to be sure to highlight, and that is, we have been joined by the first tenured African-American female faculty member in chemical engineering at NC State. She's currently at the National Science Foundation. She got on a plane to get here, and I didn't see her come in. So Dr. Christine Grant. She and Sarah have stories after stories. I know. Yeah, you can ask them afterward. So, all right. You know what? Our time is great. We are great. So now, what I'm going to do is to release you all to your afternoon sessions. Now we have 2 speakers here. We have Stephanie Easter. Eastman gave us some money last week, and I think that's just been on my mind. I'm so sorry. That's okay, because I don't know if you noticed that Bhavana's name was misspelled on the slide that whole time. If you start to get a little too cocky about yourself, stuff like that happens. I'm very sorry. And Radhika Venkatraman. They are here. They are speaking in EB1. So for undergraduate and graduate students and anybody else that wants to go, we're just going to have you follow them over there to the rooms, actually. And when your sessions are finished, the closing session, or the panel session with alums is actually we're moving it here to the Hunt Library Auditorium. So after those, then y'all just come back here to the Hunt Library Auditorium, and we have a whole cadre of alumni that are going to be here and have a panel give you some real tips on graduating and getting the best job, how to advocate for yourself as an NC State engineering graduate. So all of that will be here. I do need a couple of EAs to take our speakers and then all the people that follow them over to their rooms in EB1. Now, you're probably going to ask me what those rooms are. And I'll tell you in a minute. I will literally tell you in a minute. But before I do that, I'm going to say there's plenty of food. Make sure that you eat as much as you want. Make sure that you stay around and talk as much as you want. Anybody that wants to meet my mom and dad, come right over here to the table. Just so you know, they're bigwigs too. They are experts in electrical safety and have been widely recognized for their 7 books about electrical safety. So you might want their autographs. We may have promoted women in engineering. They've saved people's lives, so it's no small accomplishment there. All right, so I'm going to look up the rooms, and I'll make sure that the EAs know the rooms to which I'm sending you all. But I'm going to let you all chat with one another. Thank you to our recognizees who are here, and for everybody that's here. And oh yes, you have something on the table. Thank you. So Kayleen, this is Kayleen's idea, which is really good. So these packets are for you to take home. In here are seeds for you to plant your own diversity gardens. They are pollinators, so they're for pollinators. So this will do a lot of good in the world as well. So please take your seeds that I. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you all so much for coming. Appreciate you very much.